Okay, guys, we talked about the growth industry online, but more homegrown stuff. The fob teas now being reduced to £2 in the betting shops. Now, will the lost shop business prove to be an online bonanza?
I don't know. I mean, if you're in the shop in the first place, if you're playing on the machines in the first place, you've already got access to online. Will it cross over? I'm not so sure. I mean, with the £2 stakes just coming in this weekend, so it's a bit early to see kind of what kind of behaviour the customers are going to have. I mean, I certainly spoke to a couple of bookies betting on football a couple of weeks ago, asking them what the plan was, and they didn't have a clue. They had no visibility about what the customer's going to do. So, in a way, a lot of people are winging it. There's a couple of companies a couple of operators have thrown some new kind of style of games that are compliant out there today. Some of them seem to be quite controversial, but that's just the way the media at the moment. I think it'll settle down, but I don't think it'll drive people online. The only reason it'll drive people online is that the betting shops will shut, and that'll be the only option to have a bet. Okay, now you talked about industry. They're under pressure regarding advertising as well. If the bookies got a plan B, if all advertising gets banned? That's just happened in Italy, hasn't it?
Yeah.
All sponsorship.
I mean, you had some discussions around it. I mean, you got to find alternative solutions. So obviously one of them is finding new ways of acquiring without overstepping the boundaries. And we talked about social gaming, not social gaming per se, but like Sky Super 6 has its Super 6, which has been very successful. I think a model like this would work quite well to try and less aggressive, get people involved, that try a product, and then if they like it, they will find their own way to convert to the operator.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day when the online market was starting off and they were covering all countries, it was the .com model they called it. Advertising in those markets was forbidden because it was a massive grey area, and what you just found was like .net models. So you'd have bwin.net, for example, and it would just be an educational site about how to bet.
Complete model of the real money sportsbook without the real money.
So there's always ways around it. That's why I think banning it will have unintended consequences and make it a bit dark, because you've got to be able to tell people what you've got. I mean, in the old days, it's not that long ago where you weren't allowed advertising anyway, but you were allowed sponsorship. So you'd get bumpers on programmes, usually the horse racing. But there has to be some kind of sponsorship. I mean, even because the argument to ban it, it's just for a small percentage of the population. Yeah. It's a sledgehammer at cracking nut.
Okay, now you guys, in 10 years, you've become huge winners from gambling expanding across the world. Who else would be a huge winner?
I'm glad to hear we are. We're a huge winner. I mean, we're in a very competitive space, obviously, based on both the news and the event side. We combine both of them very well, and I think when we entered this business, there's always been very big organizers, probably the biggest organizers in the world, are the dominating organizers in this industry as well. So competing in this space, or even finding a way to have a sound business is not easy. It requires continuous work and working on the events, improving them, making the experiences better for the delegates, making sure the sponsors, the exhibitors are happy, and how do you grow it? How do you find time to build yourself into new markets? So there's a lot of things we worked on here, and I think what we created is obviously a way of sort of seeing that how Okay. Interruptions.
It's seen.
But you know, with that, I think it's not as easy as it sounds. We spend a lot of years creating a foundation for what we're doing, showing that we were a credible, hardworking company that would very much put the delegate and the sponsors, the exhibitors, and even the speakers first. Make sure that they had a platform where they could find themselves and think they got what they were coming for. And by doing that, I think we as I said, we established that foundation, and now we can scale it. Whether we keep it here, you know, or you know, we were already growing it into the US. We were looking at other options, of course. And then the news side has been plugged into it with working together with the events of having a coverage, 365 days a year. So that's been hard work, and I think in terms of how others sit within this industry, in terms of providing similar sort of services or products and services, I think I don't know. It's you got Clarion, is obviously people know because they're organizing ICE, and it's the biggest event. You got Reed Exhibitions that are organizing G3 in Las Vegas, Macau. I mean, we were working closely with them. So they're organizing big events, and obviously with the US now opening up, it's a lot more important to be the one that have the biggest event in the US. So, I mean, at this moment, if you look at how big the US market is, you would think the Reed has a very good foot down based on having had G3 Las Vegas for many years. So I think it's just to see how the US market plays out, and who can manage to come in and compete and sustain the event that they're creating, and then build on that and see how that will pan out. It's difficult to say, but I think Reed certainly has a good foot down based on having had that event for many years.
Sure, I mean, certainly the US market is the one that's ripe with potential. The problem you've got here, and it's the same with the question about sort of the global market, is it's not all one. It's just lots of little bits and lots of different. This place will have these restrictions. This place will have these restrictions. It's going to be the same in the States, and it's hard to get a coherent sort of brand across all of them. I mean, the only one that's even remotely managing that is Bet365, but at least the discussions are there. I mean, I suppose some of the bigger suppliers are doing well from the economies of scale, but they've a lot of times they've acquired that. So something happened in this market, they've acquired somebody, so they've got a bigger brand globally. But each market is so different to each other.
But you're talking broader than.
I am talking broader than just the event side of things.
We were focusing on the news and event side of things.
I don't think there is.
No, I had a hard time answering that question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what we're pointing out is that obviously in our side of the industry, it's very competitive. It's very hard, and I think personally we're very pleased and very happy that we brought this company to where it is today. The thing is, you don't really have to look at people as competition as well. There's a lot of partnership and cooperation that goes in. As you said, as it is for a lot of the operators with regulated markets, the same. I mean, how do you go into different markets and pretend that you know that market and you know all the local players, operators, suppliers, affiliates, media, sports, you name it. Any part of the world, there will be different mentality, different understandings, different ways of approaching an event based on how the market is of course regulated. Mm-hmm. So I think what we're seeing also is a lot of partnerships that can make it easier for the right type of events really to come together in different parts of the world, as we're talking about over here, where we think events is not just for the commercial sake, but it's also for getting people together to discuss, an industry and make sure that industry has an opportunity to speak, and bring to the agenda what's the topics that needs to be addressed before any decisions are made, especially in our industry, that might not be the best decisions.
Is there anybody that thinks at the moment they're probably going to benefit but won't?
For what, sorry?
Any sort of part of the industry that thinks they're going to be a big winner for the global expansion but there won't be?
I suppose all the suppliers can't all win, can they? I mean, there's a lot of interest in Europe to help the US develop their sports betting markets, because obviously they've decades of experience that they just don't have over there. They don't really have online gambling over there, only in a couple of states. So certainly the suppliers from over in Europe are more than well versed in that side of things. So they're seeing a big opportunity, and there's a bit of a rush. But I suppose not all of them are going to be able to do it.
Okay, now traditional bookmaking, is that becoming a bit obsolete in the bigger scheme of things these days?
Depends what you mean by traditional bookmaking these days. It's I mean, the trading floor's changed so much since Betfair, really. I mean, that's people aren't making their own lines these days. Or the ones that do, then should we say have their hard work appropriated, which gives you less of a competitive advantage, which makes it less likely to invest in. I mean, that's why you're seeing firms offering managed trade services these days.
But I guess you can also say that part of when we talked about initially with how the sports betting industry was seen when we kind of kicked off things with SBC early days with establishing the community. I mean, part of the reason why sports betting wasn't as interesting as maybe casino and poker, where you just kept raking in, is a lot of resources going into it, you know. So the fact that the sports betting industry has grown a lot over the last, say, 5 or 6 years has also to do with the way an industry changes and how products change and the services and how easy they are to use and implement. And I think the fact that maybe the trading floor is not the same, and it's not as hard work and as resource demanding, it's easier to scale a sports betting business. That, of course, and with poker sort of more or less having left the industry, and realizing that there's a lot of connection between casino and sports betting if you probably manage to work your industry, your company in the right way. So I think that also plays a part in this whole picture. So yeah, I think it's a good thing that the industry has managed to find ways of making sports betting.
I mean, that's the other thing. There's
products.
There's lots of different models that people can take. I mean, there's some casino firms plugging on a sports book just to acquire customers to flip over to the casinos. I mean, they're not going to get what you get at your traditional bookmakers, but there's still scope for traditional bookmakers to do that sort of things. I mean, certainly on the phone bookies, they're still doing it in the old way, but there's lots of different ways you can now run a sports book or a betting industry if you want to. I mean,
it also comes down to the service, I guess, and how much you appreciate a service.
Is there a future for independent bookmakers, you think, internationally?
Internationally.
It depends on the individual market, really. Certainly, as things professionalise, economies of scale pay off, and it's just a lot harder to compete. As we've seen in the UK, it's media rights that have gone up. Even when the regulator came in, there was suddenly thousands of pounds worth of fees that were never there before. It's just the levy increases, the product fees increase. Soon, I'm assuming there's going to be a point where there's going to be a levy for responsible gambling, because the industry can't get its act together to do the voluntary side of things for one reason or another. There's several valid reasons why it's stalled a little bit, but it's stalled to the point where there's going to be another tax. I mean, bring the FOBTs out of the shops, it's and to compensate for that, they increase the taxes online. It's absolutely crazy, really. So it's going to be harder. It's going to be harder. The way you think that there might be an opportunity is when the big corporates start losing interest and focusing it all online, and that's when the gaps start opening and potentially opens the door for some of the smaller firms to sort of come back into it.
In the short term for the industry in general, the future is bright?
I think based on what you said as well, as you know, that's been one of the problems, I guess, with the taxes and stuff, is also from what we hear when talking to operators or the bookmakers, there's a lot of interest in investing into social responsibility and dealing with problem gambling. But the harder they are squeezed and the more taxes, the more difficult it gets. So it's kind of like a fine line to be found between how much can you charge for this to the operator and the bookmaker versus how much do you want to deal with the actual problems on the end of the consumers, to try and give them more education, more understanding around, you know, how not to get into a situation where it's no longer comfortable doing sports betting or any other form of gambling. So I think that's an issue, and again, it is a hard one to deal with, but certainly by the UK, it's becoming increasingly difficult to keep spending money on that part, you know. And I think most operators and bookmakers have been talking to us about how keen they are on this, but they're just finding it increasingly difficult. So that's an issue, for sure, to be looked at.
No, so the future's bright. It is for a couple of them. For a couple of companies, they were on top of the compliance and got sort of deeper pockets and can take a thinner profit margin on some products. But we're getting to the point where it's going to start tipping the other way, and something that's not happened in the UK for us, it's going to be a bit more of a black market coming about, because it's going to be really difficult to turn a profit running a gambling operation, and a lot of it stems from I would say a lack of leadership in fighting the industry's cause, not even at government level, at media level. There needs to be more proactive. It's too easy to slag off the betting industry with there being absolutely no comeback at all, and we're paying for it now.
Okay, Andy and Rasmus, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks.